It's clearly a Christian text. You'd expect so. It's coming from the homily of a bishop of Axum in Ethiopia. But the question is, why is Surah 5 drawing from this source of all sources? It goes on, angels descend to tell them to disband, that each of them might search his own region to preach. The angels are welcomed in the saint's house. And when they had completed the washing of the feet of the angels and had drunk the remaining water, they sat for meal, and the light appeared as usual. When they had finished the table, Ma'idah, they heard a voice coming and calling on them. Angels were visiting them. They had visions of our Lord until they were capable of resurrecting the dead, healing the lepers by their prayer, as well as making the blind see, the lame walk, and the deaf hear. Thus they performed many miracles, and the lights, as usual, kept descending from heaven on their table. Thus they stayed for 13 years. Now, this is a homily. The impression I get from this is that this was a real event, and it's a miraculous event, and caused a bit of a stir, and obviously, as a result, the Bishop of Axum wanted to share this with the other Christians. I was looking at the idea of the miracle, which supposedly is a light shining down on the table where the monks are gathered around. And I found a modern day example of something like this. As I say, I can't confirm if this is a real miracle or not, but at least we get an impression of what we're talking about here. A light shining down during a religious service. So the homily continues. Then a monk came to them named Malkianos, who did not know any other work than women's hairdressing. He made his living out of that. He did not sit at their table, and he ate his bread alone. Thus they rebuked him, but thereafter these lights departed from them and shone above that monk. Now, I think the pretext there is that the other monks looked down at this other monk, they felt that they were better than this monk, and this monk, presumably because of the association with having worked as a woman's hairdresser, they might have thought maybe he was effeminate or something like that. But the light then shone on that monk as well. The saints then asked, "Where are our lights that used to come down from heaven on our table? Why are they now hidden from us?" The monk answered them, "My masters, today this light is shining upon me." At this moment they understood and said, "That happens because we have rebuked this monk." They embraced each other, wept bitterly for 40 days and nights, and then they departed separately, each one in his new region. So there's a lot in that homily. I can imagine why it would be spread. Lots of miracle stories, amazing sort of events with a moral to it. The idea that Christians shouldn't judge each other and never kind of second guess what God's intentions are. I don't know if you want to jump in on any of that, Jay.
Yeah, this whole thing with this from Bishop of Axum and his homily here. Seems to be, this must be the source for that. And it's, you can see why it was very popular. Not only, as you say, did it talk about the miracles, but it's also a great, it's also a great moral story. The idea that we're all equal. That doesn't matter what kind of job we do. Doesn't matter what kind of environment that we're in. There's no difference between man, woman, Jew or Greek, slave or free. We are all equal in Jesus Christ. So you can see why this then became popular, and then this would be the influence for that word itself as it was brought over.
Okay. No. So, what are the implications of this and other findings, like the Syriac sources that have been mentioned in other videos? The Quranic writers are working with multilingual sources, clearly. They are also familiar with at least three scripts: Aramaic, Arabic, and Ethiopic. Here are some examples of what each of those looked like. So on the left here you have Ethiopic. It is very similar to Sabaic, which is a Southern Arabian script. So you can imagine if someone had some experience of reading scripts way down in Southern Arabia, they could possibly read a text from Ethiopia, especially that a homily from the Bishop of Axum. On the right, we see an example of Syriac script. This one here comes from the 11th century. So what I think is happening here is that the writers of the Quran are familiar with three different scripts. You have the Aramaic script, you have the Arabic script, obviously, and you have the Ethiopic script, which is down here. If you compare the South Arabic script or the Sabaic script here, which is the second from the bottom, and compare it to the Ethiopic script, in almost every case the letters are identical. So I could imagine if someone came from South Arabia, they could manage to read an Ethiopic script, and so therefore it tells us quite a lot. The fact that there's Ethiopic words in the Quran tells us quite a bit about the writers, that they have some link with Southern Arabia, if not Ethiopia itself. I thought it would be interesting to draw a quotation from Odin Lafontaine's book, The Great Secret of Islam. If you remember, his idea was that the project of the Quran was that there were Judo-Nazarene propagandists, and they were trying to get people to see Christianity the way they view things, if you like. And they were also translating a lectionary into Arabic. So I'm just going to quote from him. He says, Judeo-Nazarene propagandists, Aramaic-speaking Jews, many of whom knew liturgical Hebrew, explained their text to the Arabs. Moreover, they trained Arab preachers, translated their texts into Arabic, and taught them. To do this, they produced for them small manuals, anthologies of the main texts of their Torah, their gospel, their customs, their laws, their rites of purity, their food codes and prohibitions, their circumcision. The most important aid memoirs consisted of translations into Arabic of the lectionaries used by the Judeo-Nazarenes themselves. A lectionary is a liturgical book which presents readings and commentaries on sacred texts, as Christians always do. Now, if Odin is correct, and I believe he's pretty much on the money on this one, it makes perfect sense if they were translating biblical passages into Arabic to consult other translations that have been done. And in the 6th century, the Bible was translated into Ethiopic. So it would make sense to look at how that was translated when translating into Arabic, and maybe use some of the religious vocabulary to fill the gaps, because Arabic didn't have ready-made words in place that they could use. So I would suggest that this is a big clue to what is going on. In this translation work, they had a ready-made example in the Bible translated into Ethiopic in the 6th century. This probably was helpful in the difficult task of translating lectionaries into Arabic, especially as much of the vocabulary didn't exist in Arabic and needed to be borrowed. And one of those words would be Ma'idah. So if we look at this image here, you can see that way up in the north is where we believe the Quran had been written. The material of the Quran was written somewhere in the red rectangle, possibly in multiple locations. We simply don't know. This was where people were bilingual in Aramaic and Arabic in the 7th century. So it makes sense that what we find in the Quran is some sort of a hybrid between both languages. Now, that would be something that Lulin didn't see, but it would have been something that Christoph Luxemburg picked up on. One of the writers had links with Yemen, may possibly studied there, such as that he was aware of the homily from Aksum in Ethiopic, and possibly knew the Ethiopic Bible as well. So I'll hand it back to you, Jay.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. I want everybody to look at this map here. There's the rectangular at the top there. That is where the Quran, we do know it was written up in that area because it has Syro-Aramaic, has an Nabatean Aramaic, it has many other antecedents. All of them exist in that area of Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and today Lebanon and Israel. So that's where the Quran, we know, was put together. That's where all the manuscripts are derived from. So why is it that they would have Syriac? Well, that's where Syriac is spoken. Why they would have Aramaic? Well, that's where Aramaic was used. What about Ethiopian? Remember what we've been saying all the way along, that all of the trade came from India and China, came across the Arabian Sea, could no longer go up through the Persian Gulf because of the warring parties between the Sassanians and the Byzantines. So that shut down the Persian Gulf. They had to be redirected down through the Gulf of Aden, up through Eritrea, Remember, it was always Agilis, the city of Eritrea, where they always stopped. All the traders stopped in Agilis, and then they went up the Red Sea. They never went to Arabia because there's no water there. We've said this so many times. Where there's no water, there's no food. Where there's no food, there are no people. Where no people, no towns, no cities, no civilization, no history. They did not go on the eastern side of the Red Sea. They went on the western side. What's on the western side? Ethiopians are. That's where the Guz was spoken. So anybody trading with and we know that all the trade went up to Petra and then from there to the Mediterranean. So all this trade going back and forth between Jordan and India and China would have all had to go through Ethiopia, all had to go through what is today Eritrea and Agilis. That's how they came across these texts. That's how you had the cross pollination. It's not that they had themselves to go there. All the trade was coming through there. All the people, and so the trade have traders, and the traders would be taking these texts with them, and they would also be using these words like Maida coming out of Ethiopia. So to me, that makes perfect sense. It fits exactly with what we've already found.
And I think another point I would say is the fact that there's only a tiny percentage of Ethiopic words shows us that it wasn't written down in Yemen, even though there's a few words there. The majority of the foreign words we find is way up in that red box. So we can eliminate the idea that it was written down in Sana or somewhere like that, just that there was that influence. And I think that trade route idea that you just mentioned makes perfect sense. All it takes is for someone to bring a Bible on a ship way up into Petra
Remember,
and
you
then
did say
into the.
that the Bible was translated into Ethiopic in the 6th century. That's 100 years earlier. It could be even 200 years from what the manuscripts are showing us. So in that 200-year period, it had made it was been used. If there, especially if you stop and think, if Agilus controlled the trade, then Agilus were the ones, the people from Agilus, which is Ethiopian. They would be the ones going to Petra. They would be ones taking the material with them. They would have Bibles with them. Those Bibles would have been used, and also they would have been cross-pollinated because with different phrases, different words, and in this case, even a homily could easily be lifted from those Bibles, or sorry, from those texts, and been used in what we now know as the Quran today.